I opened up another dream.
I don't think there's any gamer out there who has never heard of the Resident Evil franchise. Well, maybe there is, but that number must be exceptionally low. When you mention the Alone in the Dark series, however, I'm pretty sure the number rises quite a bit. If you're questioning why I just compared these two games, hang in there, we'll get there now. Despite Alone in the Dark still being a rather well-known horror game series that even released 2 movies, its prominence and success in the video game world decreased significantly due to the latest game's rather mixed and poor reception. When you look at it from a certain perspective, it is a bit sad, because without Alone in the Dark, there's a good chance Resident Evil would never have existed the way it does now. You see, a long time ago, back in 1992, Alone in the Dark was the first 3D survival horror game to come out. And it is believed that due to the game's success in 1992, it strongly influenced the production of Capcom's Resident Evil that came out in 1996. And now, a few decades after the original came out, a new developer and publisher team are reimagining the original and turning it into a full game reboot. One of the people involved here is Michael Hedberg, who is known for his role as a writer in Soma and the Amnesia titles, which are both exceptionally well-received games. But he is not the only familiar face. David Harbour, one of the main actors in Stranger Things, is voicing Edward Carnby, and Emily Hartwood is voiced by Jodie Comer, so we do have a real premium cast at work here. That sounds promising, doesn't it? So let's see if it holds up as we take a closer look at this thing. Alone in the Dark is presenting a completely original, new story, but is incorporating characters, places and themes from the first 3 games in the 90s. If you totally missed this game's announcement, here's a quick explanation of what's happening on screen. Right now, Emily Hartwood and the detective she hired, Edward Carnby, are arriving at the Dorsetto Mansion, an institution that serves as a home for the mentally ill. Now, the reason they're investigating this place is because Emily received a concerning letter from her uncle, Jeremy Hartwood. And this very letter leads them to Dorsetto. Now, as we were presented with more and more gameplay footage, it became clear that this mansion is where we will spend the majority of our playtime. Depending on who you are and what you expect from a game like this, you might have a different opinion than me here, but I personally like this approach. I think they nailed the gothic South American setting here. Especially the music seems to be an aspect. They put the extra effort in, and it absolutely shows.
Occasionally it sounds quite exciting though. Good versus evil and all that.
Combine that with the fact that it's a mansion that serves as a home for the mentally ill, and it opens up so many possibilities to create a compelling psychological horror mystery experience. Of course, it's up to the developers to make use of these possibilities and potential. The various people living here, from what we've seen, all with their own stories, fears and behaviors, but also their own unique charm, could make for some very interesting side stories and backgrounds. A very small part of that mansion was actually accessible in the prologue I played, and unlike some other critics, I did enjoy that experience, despite it not even reaching 10 minutes of playtime. Mainly I've seen complaints about the girl we played, who, according to critics, wasn't spooked enough by the weird events happening, and all around was just too phlegmatic. She just didn't really care much about the mansion changing, the monsters, etc. But here's the thing. In the very opening of the prologue, if you just take a look at her room, you should immediately notice that Grace is most likely not just an ordinary little girl. I'm actually pretty sure she's somewhat connected to the bigger picture. So I don't know if it's just me, but I think those complaints are not fully thought through. For me at least, it was clear from the beginning that this girl has a reason for her behaving the way she does. To take this a step further, she kinda reminds me of Flora from Bly Manor. She also came across as rather phlegmatic and reserved in the beginning, and only as the show goes on do we get to know the reasons and backgrounds for her behavior. But in the full game, we're of course not playing as Grace and instead can choose to play as one of the 2 protagonists, who, as you know by now, are Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood. The residents in Dorsetto will react differently depending on who we play, and the story will also slightly change. That means it definitely should be played twice, and since the 2 protagonists are vastly different in their characteristics, this could be a game where the second playthrough is actually totally worth playing, and not just 90% of the same, and some minimal changes, if any at all. Now, another thing to mention when it comes to the game's setting. Playing as a detective in a horror mystery game is a great idea, not just because playing as a detective is cool in general, because it kinda is. But if you think about it, detectives are often determined, rational and logical people, and it will be interesting to see how Edward deals with the irrational, supernatural mysteries in the game, which all contradict with his qualities. What we have barely seen anything of just yet is the combat, but from my understanding, you could probably compare it to Resident Evil. So you do have guns and melee weapons and all that stuff, but ammunition and resources will be scarce, so trying to avoid fights as much as possible will certainly be the way to go. The general package they are offering here looks very promising, but they need to nail the core elements that make a psychological horror game experience. Those are, in my opinion, atmosphere, storytelling, pacing, and of course the sound design. Quite similar to Souls-like games. If the sound design is off, or simply of insufficient quality, then a 9 or 10 out of 10 is already impossible to achieve, no matter how good the rest might be. It's that important in my opinion. But then again, what we have seen so far does look very promising in pretty much all of those aspects. And with this, I'm gonna say thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, a like is very much appreciated.